Welcome everyone to the Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host Tom Dillon. This is being recorded live at our weekly online meeting and broadcast around the world. Today's topic is faster, easier, and fairer, digitising and removing commission from the property market with the incredible Kev Monk. Before we start, I'd like to say, by way of a disclaimer, that today is a wonderful discussion, but that nothing said here constitutes financial advice. You should always take professional advice before investing your hard-earned cash. There may be the odd unplanned swear word along the way as well. The format for today, rather, is that Kev will speak to us for a while, and then we'll be taking questions from the floor. Um, I'm going to read Kev's bio out here. As I do so, I want you to have a little guess at home how old he is, and you can tell already it's a trick question. So either go really old or really young, you'd probably be on the money. But you can also have an honest guess at what you want. How old you think he is here. This isn't going to work if you've watched him on YouTube nearly as well because you can probably see him. Kev started his career 20 years ago, attempting to convince people to buy white goods at a little startup which went on to become AO.com. After 15 years at AO in various senior roles, Kev has helped digitize other industries, including airport services, and most recently, intensive driving courses. Kev went on to found Moove. I'm not, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Moov. I'm sure Kev will give us a proper demonstration in a minute. Now in its second year, Moove intends to help. I'm trying to distinguish it from just saying the word move, and difficult. Now in its second year, Moove intends to help one of the last remaining markets make that transition and unlock better client experiences at a more cost-effective service. When I read that, I thought Kev was going to be about 70 and maybe had a few years to really make a go of this business before it's going to be time to hit the golf course. But I get the feeling looking at him that he's back, doing a bit younger than that, perhaps, and has just packed a lot into to his life so far. How's it going?
Yeah,
Hello.
not too bad. Thanks for that. It's the first time I've been called incredible, or at least in a while. So I'll take that. I'm winning already, it seems. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm not very good at golf,
Mm.
so that's not going to fly. And obviously, as Moove, which I'll come on to, is a digital first business. Obviously, we say Moove, we take a word and we spell it wrong, which is
Yeah.
the hallmark of every digital business. You either drop a vowel somewhere or you spell it wrong intentionally. So it's in the
We're lucky,
manual.
really, because most digital businesses just lose an E, don't they? Typically, they'll just
Yeah,
lose an E.
exactly. Yeah. Put
And
an
if
R
they,
on the end.
exactly, and if you'd done that, you'd be called Mov. So
Yeah.
this is better. Like of
Yeah.
all the digital
Yeah.
respellings of stuff, this isn't so bad, really.
Yeah. This is the best of a bad bunch, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
won't pass it out to the brand team. I'm sure they'll.
Yeah, yeah. Get that on the business cards by Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. Move. Best of a bad
Yeah.
bunch.
Yeah.
That could have been the title.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That could be a working subtitle. Just before we get onto the good stuff, which I'm sure Kev's bursting to tell us, I hope he is, otherwise it's going to be crap in it. But before we get to the good stuff, I'm right thinking that you're originally from Lee, which is one of the few. There's not many people from a rougher part of the world than me, and there might be some lovely parts of Lee, by the way. I'm not having to go all the parts of Lee, but I'm definitely having to go the parts of Lee that I know well, which are grim. Some of them, anyway. Were you from one of the nice parts of Lee that I don't know about, or was it?
But I mean, I always tell people I'm from Wigan because people wouldn't
Mm.
know where Lee was. But I did spend a chunk of my life from between the ages of 3 and 12 living in Wesley, which is one of the rougher bits.
Yeah,
I suppose you've kind of got Goulburn, Lowton on that end. I think we're
yeah,
Burnham's up there somewhere, and then you've got Wesley, which is in the mix, so to speak.
yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah.
get life skills. You get life
Character,
skills.
isn't it? Yeah, 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 yeah.
And the sound
Interesting.
of motorbikes in the night
Yeah, yeah,
quite
yeah, yeah. A lot of
soothes
cars
you
on the
out.
track without any wheels.
Yeah, we used to gather around the burnt out car for
For warm, yeah, and it's cold there too. The wind blows through.
yeah,
Maybe why the
chilling.
properties are so damn cheap. So yeah, check that out for good property deals, Lee. Lee is also the only place that I've turned down a property deal, I think, ever because I thought the area was too rough. And I don't mean Lee all of it. I definitely invest in Lee because I'm of course tongue in cheek. I'm gonna go. I quite like parts of Lee. And the Atherley Road is one of my favourite roads. But uh, but but I did turn this particular house down because I thought this is just rough around it. But the people of Lee, by the way, are also lovely. I'm saying that for my own personal safety. What have you got for us? What have you got for us today, Kev?
Yeah, so I thought it'd be good to just give you a quick background to me, you can maybe help guess my age a little bit more accurate after that. And then just basically give you an overview of what Moove is, why we've started it. There've been no sales pitches, and so to speak, but obviously, hopefully, the threaded in our amazing as we go along. But yeah, and just answer any questions you would have. Um, I'll come on to it, but kind of starting in the middle and then get back to the start. We are a business that's new. I think the core of what we're trying to do is good. I think the proposition we have is good. We're just in that new phase where not many people have heard of us. And if you have heard of us, you most certainly haven't used us yet. So we're in that kind of lack of awareness, building up credibility, and we're just in those. People say they're exciting, but they're not. The tough early stages. I seem to find myself in these stages all the time. At some point, I'm beginning to think it's me, but it's yeah, so I'll kind of get straight into it. So, I mean, full disclosure, I'm new to property. I guess I'm most certainly no more qualified, definitely less qualified than the majority, I guess, if not all of you in this room. So I'm not going to give you the insights of property. And I was, as you say, I was a very early team member at a business called DRL Limited, which everybody now knows as AO.com. And spent those very early years. I think I joined the business, there was maybe 30 people in. So there was initial couple of hard years ago off the ground, but it was very much a bit Wild West. And we were convincing people to buy washing machines on the internet. And essentially, that was a lot more difficult than anybody can imagine it is today. And we used to do a lot of good stuff, but people would still be reluctant to try it. And if they did, we'd speak to them afterwards and they'd feel like they'd somehow cheated the system. You'd get, yeah, I bought a washing machine off you guys and you turned up. And I was like, yeah. And you delivered it into my kitchen. We're like, yeah, that's what we said we'd do. And eventually we kind of, as the business grew, I moved around a lot in the business. So I was very fortunate to join a business that grew quicker than they could recruit, and they had a natural reluctance to bring anybody in. So you got given opportunities. So I worked in the finance team, commercial team, became operational, did strategy, and it set up a warranty division. So apologies if anybody's been hounded to take out the 499 washing machine plan. But we did that, and that was quite lucrative for the business. Went to Europe and came back. But during, I'm a big believer you're a product of what your nature versus nurture. I think both impact you, and it was fantastic to work in a business like AO that put the customer first. And a lot of businesses say that and they have the lanyard, but we really did. And I was the part of the net promoter score kind of revolution. Would you recommend us to a friend or family? Not to 10. We were one of the first people to ask that, and got that to a really good score. The 10 days no quibble returns. That was another one where, and the theme throughout a lot of this, free next day delivery was another one. The theme for this was John Roberts, who was the founder, was very much big on do what's right for the customer and then work out how you deliver it. And I was part of the team that worked out how you deliver it. So always a challenge, and he'd always up the ante. But during that time, I met the Bruce brothers, Kenny and Michael from Purple Bricks, and they wanted to start offering washing machines as part of the moving process. And I was sat there at the time running the B2B division. And I kind of thought, oh yeah, it's interesting that I guess property isn't online as such, because I was too busy thinking about washing machines and maybe fridge freezers at the time as well. But so I kind of always had an eye on property, and I've moved 15 times in my life, but I've not moved in the last 11 years. So that's quite a kind of, it means I had a very intense period of moving up until the age of 30. And then I've managed to kind of stay put for the last actually 13 years. So it's been, every time I moved, I felt the process could have been quicker. It was a little bit, frustrating. You're kind of going along these stages offline, and I don't want to make this sound like I have anything against estate agents, which I don't, but I think estate agents are a part of the process, and they're in sales roles sometimes, and they're not salespeople. It's kind of like my experience I had briefly at the airport, where the airport's a business that makes a lot of money, but it's actually not generating its own sales. It's just literally, I wouldn't say parasite. That's too strong of a term, but it's as people go through the airport, they're skimming money. And I think there's an element of that in estate agents. And I was saying in the breakout room, like, I remember booking my first holiday in Lee and a Lund Poly, which was at Bradshawgate. And I walked into the shop and I sat with a woman, and she was very nice, and she told me where I was going on holiday. And I left there, I think 90 minutes later with a holiday to Benidorm. So you get an insight into my earlier years. And I think now, if you would imagine that process in travel, you probably couldn't. So I think, to kind of put a bow on this, I think you've got retail, banking, and travel, which have all massively digitalized over the last 10, 15 years. And I think property, whilst it has started, I think it's one of the few remaining industries where that's yet to come. And I think it's an exciting place. And again, you base a lot of your future decisions off your past experiences, and looking at how we convince people to buy washing machines, and looking at how we convince people to buy driving lessons, or book your parking at the airport. I think more and more there's the digitalization wave as things like big events like COVID come over, and suddenly like Catalyst changed the game. But I think there's also a natural undercurrent of moving more and more things online. So from that regard, I think property is a huge opportunity to do it. And then using my kind of experience of putting the customer, and in this sense, there's four distinct types: buyers, sellers, letters, and obviously landlords. So trying to do that from an outsider point of view gives me a different perspective. I've not spent 15 years in my mum and dad's estate agent practice, where it's now my time to take over, and I'm the revolutionary, and I'm going to try and leave my mark on it. This is coming in completely saying, what if we just did it different? And I think one of my things I rally on is, it's interesting, kind of, you sometimes have to be careful with this, because not everybody likes conspiracy theories, but I believe I believe the property industry in itself is set up to serve itself, almost to maintain the status quo. And when I say the industry, I'm not talking about landlords, of which I am one of them. That was my first entry into the property industry, was I became a landlord. And I've got a couple of properties now, but it was more, the buying of that property was an absolute nightmare. The local letting agent which was a lovely person, came round and told me how much I'd get for it. I was like, oh great, yeah, and then wanted 10%. I was thinking, wow, 10%, and all these things, which from a position of naivety was kind of like, going 10%, and what do you do? Well, yeah, nothing is the answer, unless something bad goes wrong. But in touch wood, I've maybe had good tenants, but very little has gone wrong. So I believe there's a pyramid which is set up, and right at the top there's good old government, or HMRC, whichever colour they were in at the time, and they'll tax you in many ways, whether it's capital gains, whether it's VAT, whether it's stamp duty, whether it's anti-money laundering subscriptions that you've got to pay, whether it's PAYE for your staff. The whole thing is being funneled up to those guys. And then underneath that in the pyramid, you've got the big three property portals, of which one's the giant and two are fighting for scraps, of Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market. I think Booming came in and came out. And then underneath that pyramid, you've got all these various now systems: Valpal, agent this, agent that, Streets, where they're all taking money. And then underneath that, you've got your 5,000 conveyancers, your surveyors, your brokers, you've got your 50,000, give or take, estate agent branches. So you can see this massive pyramid of money that has to then ultimately take that out of the 28 million houses that we have in this country, doing 1.2 million moves a year. And there's about, from depending on who you ask, there's about 4 million private rental properties out there. So all that, all those ultimately sellers and landlords, in my view, are propping up a huge industry above it, which is just, I guess, taking, and ultimately that has to go to increase property prices, or increase, your rental yields, rental amounts, because then that pays up, and I think it ultimately is that pyramid needs to be taken on. And that is ultimately the gambit of Moove, of can we create something that's different that ultimately rebalances that out. So I guess what is Moove? So Moove is we are an online property platform and agent for buyers, sellers, landlords, and tenants. And we a lot of the time get the purple bricks comparison, which is quite often the easiest way to think of us. And then once you've got to that position, think slightly different. You know, we believe purple bricks are a traditional agent that moved online. We're trying to obviously be essentially basically an online platform that empowers people to come on board, and then we as an agent help them fulfill it. And essentially we starting from an online approach, we essentially believe fundamentally that you should pay for the services you receive, not the value of your asset. And you know, if your property's gone up by 50,000 or your rental income's gone up by 100, you shouldn't pay any more for that. That's yours. You should pay us as Moove for the amount of essentially the amount of service you receive. So we kind of have a fixed fee selling price of 999, just whatever it is. So if it's 100,000, you're probably in line with what an agent charge you. If it's 500,000, you're probably saving £4,000. But ultimately, we believe fundamentally, if you're selling a house that's 200 or 400, it's the same journey. We'll still put you on Rightmove. We'll still give you a for sale board. We'll still do all these things. You shouldn't pay us double the price because the house is worth more. And I think that's one of the kind of the main issues in the industry. And similar for the landlords, we have a £30 fixed per tenancy per month letting charge for fully managed. So that comes with, you know, rental reviews, all tenant handles, 24/7 emergency lines, pretty much all that's included. Because ultimately, you know, the difference we can do against traditional agents is because we're digital first and national, we're a normal local agent, and to give them their kind of due here, they are geographically locked into an area. So if you're the agent for Lee, you basically have a very tight window of the amount of money you can make from people. So you have to make more money from a fewer group of people, from a smaller group of people, but we get to make less money from a wider group of people. So ultimately, it's just changing down its head to say, rather than make a lot of money out of every landlord, we'd rather make a little bit of money out of every landlord, but ultimately cast the net so wide, we have more landlords. And that's ultimately the kind of key distinction. So we put all that in the kind of with no contracts, no interest in no increase in fees, and we see we as a new business taking on the industry in a way, we see some of the nastier sides, which you guys may have experienced. We have a landlord who's trying to move a couple of properties onto our platform, and his current letting agent is making it incredibly difficult. He has to pay them £300 to take his tenant with him, and it's ridiculous. He's had the tenant for 6 years. It's like, well, why? And ultimately, it's that kind of, he's paying them 11%. You know, so he gets to maybe save about 70% on his fees. So for us, it's a no-brainer. He's kind of like, yeah, I'd love to come over. But the letting agent is making it impossible, and he has to pay to leave, and he has to pay to renew every year. So we kind of just taking it from the kind of previous AO principles of just do what's right by the customer and work out how you make it work on the other side. You know, control your cost base. We're not purple bricks Yopa, and you know, we're not splashing multi-millions on advertising, which doesn't help us with awareness, grantedly, but it means we can control costs and grow sensibly. So our kind of going back to the title of this kind of this monologue, so to speak, is we're essentially saying, you know, we want to make the industry faster, easier, and fairer, and that means it's kind of, we can approach it in a way that says it shouldn't take 4 months to sell a house. It shouldn't take, you know, a couple of days to get hold of somebody. So how do we make it faster? It shouldn't, you know, everybody who uses us gets an online account so they can see everything they need to see. They can access all the information on tenancies or properties or listings. So that should be easier. And ultimately, fairer is you should pay for the services you receive, not for the value of your assets. Because if you're paying things on the value of your assets, it's a tax. And I think traditional agents tax you. They don't charge you for their services, they tax you based on your wealth. And it's interesting that I think fundamentally, I don't think that's right. I think if you've got a house that's £50,000 more in the same street just because you put an extension on it or you've renovated it, it's a house flip, you shouldn't be paying any more to sell it on the other side. It just doesn't make sense. And if anything, you've made it easier for the agent to sell. So we kind of believe on that. And our vision is that there's no commission out there, and we're on a mission, which is when you pick these missions and we sit in a room and we came up with it, it felt quite big. But when you think of the size of the industry, it's more than doable. But we want to remove 1 billion in commission from the market. That's our kind of first stage of how do we remove 1 billion? And that's ultimately from people kind of making sure they pay for the services. So we're approaching around 100,000 so far in our first year, but that's doubling. We saved about 3,000 last week. So the rate of commission that we're taking out the market is growing, which is good. On that, we believe there'll be tipping points. And I was talking earlier in one of the breakout rooms about some of the things that happened on the AO journey, which were huge. One of them was Comet going bust. When Comet went bust, it was selling around 3 million a week in white goods. They went away overnight, and then suddenly those 3 million had to be distributed. So AO at the time received an uplift of around £1 million a week in washing machines and other white goods. And I think there'll be an element of that because every house that we sell or every landlord that we service, we're removing huge chunks of commission out of local areas. And at the moment, we are based, our office is in Bolton, so that's where most of our business comes from word of mouth and getting out there in the local press. But it's there will be a time where we're taking so much of that commission out and redistributing it that actually the agents around us either have to completely up their game or they have to change their model. And I think during the AO years, we've used to go to local appliance salespeople around the corner. That changed fundamentally the market. So I think there's a huge opportunity about basically giving the power and the empowerment to the sellers and to the landlords, and ultimately removing the commission. So that's what we're all about. We get a lot of why are you so cheap? And I think it's a brilliant way to kind of look at it, but I don't believe it's that we're too cheap. And maybe we might be a little bit too cheap. We're a new business, we're trying to get business in. But I think it's that everybody else is too expensive. I think it shouldn't charge, I know somebody who's recently sold a house with an agent and they didn't use Moove. And I think it's somebody I know, and we had a conversation of why. And ultimately they weren't ready to take that risk with us, and that's fine, because I remember those early days where people still went into a Couriers and bought the washing machine. But it's when I worked out they paid £8,000 in commission versus the £999 they would have paid with us. So it was quite a substantial property. It was around 900,000 this property, and you have that conversation with them, and you say why, and they say, oh well, the agent had the agent told us they could sell it really quick. It's like, well, fundamentally, if you're set at the right price and your house is on Rightmove, that's where all the buyers are. Rightmove have done a fantastic job over the years to own all the buyers and the tenants. We're not taking on Rightmove. We never could. I think eventually events, will do more events. Will come over and there'll be something else. Maybe it's ChatGPT. Maybe the kids out there will start using generative AI to find a house. Who knows? But ultimately, there is no legitimate reason why he paid £8,000 to sell his property versus £999. And actually, the thing is, and our key difference is we encourage you to do the viewings because that's where a lot of cost sits. But he did some of the viewings, and that's the crazy thing. So it's like, why was you paying that? And I think there's a mentality of, because you're selling a house and the fee gets taken out of your proceeds, people don't have to go to the bank to pay that. So I think people, almost like monopoly money, people don't see it. But yeah, times are tough. There's cost of living and all these kind of crises that impact us. And whatever's happening in the Middle East, if the fuel goes up and stuff. So, but people don't yet link the two together. And I think they will eventually. And if we can make a little bit of money off a lot more people, we'll end up as a business obviously making more money net. But traditional agents and landlord and letting agents have to make a lot of money off the local area, and I think that's one of the key differences to us. So yeah, I'm conscious of the time and getting to Q&As, but yeah, we've broken down the market into four areas in terms of landlords, because that's where a lot of our focus is at the moment. We have people with agents, and as you guys will appreciate, they'll be paying around 8 to 10%. So essentially, at our £30, we can ultimately save them a lot of money, and it's all the same things. They get all the same things. We then have a next group of people, and it's very much a spectrum. I call them the hanging on, and these are essentially private landlords who it's not their sole job. They have a day job. They have maybe a small portfolio of 1 to 3, and they are essentially managing it like a side hustle, but with all the changing rules around renters' rights and the anti-money laundering checks and the right to rent. And I always say everything beginning with R. It's becoming more difficult. So I think we can, for £30, they wouldn't want to go to a lesson agent because they might be paying £100 a month. But for £30 a month, we become a bit more attractive. So they're our next kind of batch. And then we've got another one, which we call Lions. And Lions are people with portfolios above 10. But ultimately, they probably have, kind of employed people in place who would do the admin and stuff. So they're probably not for us, but we can help them find tenants in a very similar to model to open rent. So we kind of engage with those guys. And then last but not least, we call them the lone wolves. And I might be in a room, a pack of wolves right now, but these are private landlords where it has become their job. It is their sole job. They're not kind of an accountant by day, landlord by night. They'll put a cape on. Ultimately, you'll see these people on podcasts like this and other events, because they are actively engaged and they want to be good landlords and they want to understand the rules. So with those type of guys, yes, we can help them, and we appreciate they probably don't want to use a service like us, but we can help them find tenants, and we can help tenancy services, and we can potentially help them opening up our systems online. So the actual market's got a lot of opportunities to us, but as we continue to grow and build kind of our reputation, it's one of those where I'm a big firm believer that people are using the current systems because it's what they've always believed, and they've never known a different way, and we're out there to kind of show them a different way. So I mean, and ultimately, before I kind of pass it back to yourself, Tom, is we've just launched a referral scheme. So we want to remove commission from the market, but we also want to put it back because of the way that the market's set up with commissions and things. Google and as you guys might appreciate, Google and other paid media is very expensive because people have very big commissions, so they can pay a lot to attract an opportunity. Where we're trying to say out there is like, if you create an account on Moove, in your account section, you'll have your own unique code. And that unique code basically gives you the ability to, let's say you are a landlord, and you don't have to be using us, by the way, you just have to have an account because the code is unique to you. If you know another landlord who's sick of their agent, give them your code. If they stay with us for 3 months, if they join and stay with us for 3 months, you get £30, which is 1 month's fee that we would get. If you potentially give it to somebody who sells the house, we'll give you £100 on completion. So we're almost trying to navigate Google's expensive costs by actually empowering people to almost spread the word for us and reward them for doing so. So hopefully I've not run over too much. I think I'm roughly on the 30 minutes. And basically, yeah, over to yourself, Tom, and any questions, and yeah, please make them easy.
Yeah, someone launched those diagonal fireworks. We've got on there some, but I think they're those ones your kids get where it's always a worm at the end, isn't it? Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed hearing what you got to say, and bubbling over with questions as usual. But also my short-term memory shot as usual, so fortunately I've written some of them down. You're saying you've got Moove has got nationwide coverage. Does that include
Yeah.
a lead?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Lee. Lee's the only town, or I believe this might not be fully true, but I know it's true, but I don't know if the caveat is true. It's the only town in the UK that's over a certain size that doesn't have a train station. So we luckily it has a bypass, but not a train station. So, but yes, we can do leave forced.
You can
Uh,
do, yeah, you can do lay off the misguided busway that goes there.
yeah,
Um,
at the bus station, spinning
uh,
Jenny.
Excellent stuff. That's good to know for the good burkers of Lee. Um, I really liked when you started off, and everyone, including me, when I started a few new businesses. All of them died, obviously, and I used to tell the same lies. Oh, it's the exciting new
Yeah,
startup stage of the business. And you went,
yes,
no, it's not. It's freaking hard work, and there's loads of challenges. But by the sounds of it, you've been through it more than well. You talked about going through
yeah.
it with what is now AO and stuff. What? What generally do you think marks out? And I'm not just talking about property. I'm just interested in startup stuff. In case I ever do in the future, and I'm sure lots of our listeners are either doing similar things or will do in the future. So, what marks out maybe for you a successful startup from an unsuccessful one, and also what's good, bad, and ugly, and what makes it tough? That's for me. And without trying to answer my old question, we'll leave you to answer it. But it's just that you've got to do everything, haven't you, I suppose?
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree. No, yeah, I think it's interesting. I attend a lot of kind of meetings now with other people doing startups, and quite frankly, you find yourself in other rooms with people who have small businesses, and there is a slight difference between a startup and a small business. They're both small, but one is a business that's actually running, and a startup's still in that kind of will it work phase. And quite often when I've had a very, satisfying and varied career where quite often I've been in some big businesses. And when you're in a big business, especially as you get into a senior role, you have teams of very competent people around you. And you kind of learn so much. And now I find myself sat in rooms where I used to have a team of brilliant people coming up with stuff, and now it's all sat there with me. And you there's a film, I don't know if there are any film buffs, called The Layer Cake, and I won't swear on it, but there's a place that Michael Gambon says at the end of, you start off in the crap, I'll say, and you knee deep in it, and you get out yourself, and eventually his story goes to the one day where you can't remember what crap smells like, and going back to startups, suddenly you're not knee deep, you're hip deep in the crap. So it's that kind of mental kind of grit, and even some of the tougher roles, you always have colleagues and peers. So it's great. I think the what kind of gets it is a couple of things. I think a core set of principles. So we're trying to do everything that's right for the customers we're trying to get to. So we're trying to at least remove the argument that, actually you didn't that wouldn't have worked for a customer. So if we can start off with that and remove that barrier, the next one is costs. So just making sure that you can keep going, is the thing. Keeping the fight, keep going. Because again, I was talking earlier on the breakout. It then comes about that moment of luck, and I'm a big believer in walk through doors, because you don't know what door's on the other side of that door. And even having a conversation with you this morning, I don't know who sees this. And somebody might see that, who might go, you know what, that move sounds like a brilliant idea. And that might just absolutely be the moment of luck, the serendipity that jumps us forward 6, 12, 18 months. So it's just a case of, control your costs, have a good core set of principles so you can stay in the fight and get your return on luck. When that good luck happens, make sure you leverage it. When the bad luck happens, make sure you were controlling costs to kind of keep it contained.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think my business partner Chris would forgive me if I didn't say welcome to the layer cake. So, um,
Yeah, exactly.
one of his favorite films. So then zooming in maybe on your current business.
Yeah,
Oh, another story that you reminded me of was I was speaking to a guy a couple of years ago. Again, similar in that he was working for a company where he had maybe 50 people working for him, big team, and then went to do a startup, and so he's now on his own. And he'd go to networking meetings or other meetings and find himself around a boardroom table, and he found himself very nearly just shouting at someone saying, "You go and do that," and then he
yeah,
realised at the
yeah,
last minute they didn't
yeah,
work for him,
yeah.
and he was
Your
just a
delegation
networking
muscle
meeting,
gets
and he'd go, "Oh my
underused.
God." You know, it's like don't order anyone around. No one here works for you. No one here works for you. That's what.
It's just to kind of add on that, it's when you're in a room and there's plumbers and electricians and all very skilled people, but they've got bigger businesses than you have, and you've been used to running budgets of hundreds of millions, and suddenly the guy, with his name on a van is more successful than you are. And you're sat there hanging on by a thread, and he's, telling you he'll get round to your house later if he can fit you in. And you're like, "Ah, how did
Yeah.
this all turn around? What happened? Topsy
Out of the
turvy, man."
mighty, out of the mighty fallen.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
well, speaking of that, uh, uh, you know, th I'm trying to craft a question, which is probably my job here, but I'm not very good at it. So that you said that if someone's got a bigger house, they shouldn't pay more money, and that to do so is
Yeah.
like a tax. Like if your house is worth X, then you're going to pay more. But hang on a minute, surely if you're going to manage a managing a two-bed terrace, I'm going to stop picking on Lee. Managing a two-bed terrace in a normal suburb of Manchester versus managing, and it's unusual for them to be tenanted, but sometimes they are, some very nice stout Georgian number in the Cheshire countryside. That costs more money to manage, doesn't it? More
I,
work to do, surely.
I would put it back and say how. So as a landlord, you're still on the hook for the gas safe certificates, you're still on the hook for the maintenance, you're still on the hook for whatever may need. So and I think I probably didn't say this, but fundamentally, and I guess there's a lot of parallels with travel. There'll still always be a case for great agents. There'll always be an opportunity, I think, because if you're booking that honeymoon and you want to go and on safari, then you want to fly here and you want this and you want the room to be perfect, use an agent. Use an agent and make them make because they will earn their keep. And I
Yeah.
think there will be a natural level of businesses like Moove where you're selling that, that £6 million mansion, with it's this, that, the other, it's got the little gatehouse. Yeah, you probably don't want to use Moove. And I think and I think that's fine to accept that because you can't be all things to all men. However, to answer your question there of, I guess why? I mean, for the landlord, the equation is obviously I would expect the income to be higher and I would expect the maintenance and upkeep to be higher because that gravel drive might need re-raking, whatever, you might have to have a gardener. But fundamentally, from our point of view, we're still going to have a tenancy agreement with the tenant. They're still going to be ringing us up if anything goes wrong, which is a call. Whether you're ringing from £1 million mansion or £100 council house, it's a call. And from that point of view, our job as the business is to make sure the cost to serve isn't any higher. But ultimately, for the landlord, the cost of maintenance and those bills, I'm sure the boiler service will be a lot more expensive. But that's already on the landlord. So why should we arguably be taking? Let's just say one's £2,000 a month and one's £200 a month, or 500 quid. Just keep the maths easy. Well, we shouldn't get £50 for the small one and suddenly £200 when we do the same job. Now that might be naive, and we'll see. And that's the gamble. But ultimately, the landlord would be still paying the higher maintenance anyway, so they shouldn't be paying a higher, you know, tenant management fee.
Mm. An agent friend of mine was once asked a brilliant question when a very well-to-do lady came in and was asking about property and this, that, and the other, and thinking about using his company to as the managing agent to manage the property. And at the end, she said, "Yeah, it all sounds good, but what do you do about the farriers?" Because of course, for those who've not been paying attention, the people who professionally fit horseshoes, and the guy went, "Yeah, I've not had that one before." That one's not... wait, I don't know whose responsibility it is for a kickoff. Like, is that the tenants? Is that on the landlord? I don't know. Anyway, vets bills are going up all the time. Let's not get into that. But sticking on the animal theme, it felt a bit like at the end there we were into a personality test, and everyone loves a personality test.
Yeah.
I basically want to find out if I'm a lone wolf. So you might have to run through these animals again for me again. Was there some sort of scraggy mountain goat at the start of the
Yeah,
segment?
there was, and I'm always trying not to cause offence, but internally we've got another couple of animals, and basically we would say the people with letting agents, and it's us trying to understand how to find them, what
Sure.
makes them tick, and what argument to have with them to convince them that we're better. And we do have people with letting agents already, and they're in the field, they're in the pasture, they've got jobs, they just it's a passive income, and so we kind of have them as ultimately sheep. The animal you're talking about is the goats. So the goats are, like I say, it's not their primary focus. They've got a job that they're doing, and I think of the goat in the sense of it's a very hardy animal, hard working. It's in the rain, the wind's bashing it because the government's going to, it's going through the House of Lords at the moment, the renters' rights. You kind of you've got one eye on it, but it's not your day job.
Mm.
You're thinking, God, how is this gonna impact me? But likewise, you're not prepared to give £100 a month up um, for an agent to manage it. But
Yeah.
£30 a month, the cost of a mobile phone bill, we might win that argument. And that's kind of how we target the lone wolves. Are the I think the people who ultimately property is their primary focus, and they take pride in knowing their stuff. And I
Mm,
think
mm,
that's the difference. The difference between a goat and a wolf is the goat's being forced to do it because the
mm.
world's changing around it. And actually, I'm an accountant by day, and God, that house I've got, what a nightmare.
Pain in the
But
ass, yeah.
yeah, but I get a nice little bit of an income from it, and whereas the lone wolf is kind of like, all right, bring it on.
Yeah,
I'm
right on it.
going to listen to this webinar. I'm going to find out, because
Pour the
ultimately
whole, pour the
building
whole
my portfolio. Yeah,
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so you mentioned, I think, so with to digress and wander about a bit with the animal metaphors and so on, I think that's really useful. I can't speak for anyone here or listening or watching because you have to decide for yourself. But I think it's really useful from anyone thinking about it if you've got a business. I think it's really impressive, frankly, and something I'm terrible at of identifying. There's a fancy name for it, isn't it? The like not a cartoon, but like a you go to the
persona or avatars. Avatars,
avatar. I'm trying
personas.
to a persona, yeah, even better. One of those where you build up and I don't want to say straw man, because a straw man by definition is a false thing, but a real sort of, yeah, an avatar, a picture of who your customer and a customer or customers are, and what maybe you can help different people in
Yeah.
different ways. And I think Kev and company have done that expertly here. Um, so, so you said that with, I think it was the lone wolves, because they're going to be kind of on it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, just using them as an example, but that you felt, for example, that you might be able to help them with, was it tenant fines or
Tenancy fine, yeah. So and again, we're trying to. Obviously, the one that sits above all this is the one that we aren't for in any way, which is well, we don't believe we are because you never know, but it's the kind of almost the corporate landlords. So the
yeah,
big ones, the ones that that's my concern about the market. If that was going to be a question at some point, my concern is that a lot of the things that are happening now are ultimately making it harder for the individual to be a
mm,
landlord, and it'll get swept up by huge buying blocks, whether it's your BlackRock, whether it's your banks and stuff. And then ultimately, basically, all these new laws and rules, they'll be fine because they'll have legal teams and legal teams. So the tenant won't be in a better position because they'll just be fighting a bigger legal team. Whereas the people, the actual bread and butter of the industry, the individual landlords in this sense, will have been forced out. So we're not yet ready to kind of take that on. But one day, when we've got a bit of strength behind us, because I think that's fundamentally wrong. But and I've lost you what your question was, but yeah, I've gone completely off. But I've
lost my
don't
train
know
of
what.
thought.
Yeah, I've lost myself in the weave, as Donald would say. But yeah, I think it was around Lone Wolves, wasn't it? And how we can help with tenancy find. And I think we're building a lot of software ourselves, and ultimately it's opening that up. So anybody can create an account, anybody can log on, and you can upload your properties yourself. We don't have to manage them. And then, but if you want us to ultimately give your tenant a front end, you can save it as documents and stuff. It becomes more of a CRM.
Yeah,
So we're opening that up per tenancy as well. So we call that our pro package, which is aimed at the people who are professional, and our managed package is called managed, which is aimed at the people you want to manage. Ron seal, do what it says on the tin. But yeah, ultimately we can help with tenancy finding, we can help with tenancy referencing, and as the new laws come in where you can't really kick people out with Section 21, that's going to become more important. So we can help those people, but I would imagine those people would never want us to manage their properties ultimately because that's what they take pleasure in doing and learning those rules.
Unless I missed it, just for people listening, how much do you charge currently for a tenant finders, or does it vary a bit?
A tenant fine is £99, but if we're managing your property, it's free.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So ultimately, and we're debating for the people who might be using the kind of pro package, whether it's completely free or it's half price. Because ultimately, we are in that stage where I think said, we're not too cheap, they're too expensive. I think
Mm,
if you go on some of the bigger businesses or your locals, they charge a fortune to find tenants.
yeah.
And coming at it from a different point of view, ultimately, Rightmove charges a small fortune to be on there because we're an agent. But ultimately, we're paying that bill anyway. So why wouldn't we help you find a tenant? Because from our point of view, it brings more tenants to be aware of us. It brings more landlords to be aware of us. If we do a good job for you, you might tell another person. So ultimately, delivering a good service in the longer term pays off. The trick is
Yeah.
to make sure you don't go bust whilst you're establishing yourself as a great service, and that's ultimately my main job. But it's and we're not necessarily at that risk, but it's that kind of why wouldn't we? It doesn't cost us any more. It costs us marginal to do the checks and stuff like that. So ultimately, if you're showing us some commitment and joining as a monthly income, recurring income, well, we'll do the
Yeah.
tenancy fine for free. It's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Let's jump on. Oh, hello. Yes. Let's jump on some answers to listeners' questions, which I think might cover Yogish's question. We'll find out. My guess is that like Purple Bricks, who you mentioned, so I'm okay to mention them as a similar but different company. Um, uh, uh, with both tenant find and with buying and selling, and I can't. Maybe they'll just those two. The viewings are done by the landlord in all cases.
Yes, so we can so we these are our rules and we do have others. So we encourage the landlord and the seller to prefer to do the viewings because from a seller's point of view, there's nothing more frustration when I was buying a house. You go and you ask the person who's sat on the sofa who doesn't know the house and they don't know the questions and what's the broadband like? I don't know. So and I think from a landlord point of view is that ultimately, with the changes that are coming in regulation, the tenant you put in your property, you're going to have a harder time to get out. So it's can you afford is the question back to just not even know who's in your property. Now we do have some tenants. We have one that's based out of the country, that landlord, sorry, that's based out of the country, and we do it for them, and we charge them £50 per viewing because ultimately there's a cost in that for us to arrange it and it gets seen and we get reports and stuff. But ultimately, our kind of main thrust, so to speak, is to say you do the viewings. We'll get you on the portals. We'll tenant reference once you pick who you want. And again, very similar to open rent. You guys know open rent. And yeah, to see somebody do floor plans. Yes, we can send photographers out for the photographer, the floor plan, and things like that. So that can all be covered off. It's more the biggest cost in the industry I've found so far, apart from the portals, is the viewings. So if we can take that out, ultimately, how can you be so cheap? Well, ultimately, the rest is almost on demand. The viewings is very speculative, and that's where you can really start to cost a lot of money. The difference with people like Purple Bricks, and I think you said like they encourage you to do their own viewings. They have the local property experts who are basically freelance estate agents knocking about. And yeah,
Um,
and that's true. Yeah, and I guess from that question, yeah, it would cost us that too, and that's how that's why you might get it costed. But ultimately, that's why we encourage the landlords to do the viewings themselves. And on the back of that, it's your property. It's going to get increasingly difficult to kick them out. And if they are a bad tenant, I don't think you should be kicking any tenant out. That's a good tenant, but if you wanted to evict them, it's going to be very difficult post Christmas.
I'm going to bring Yogesh in. Yogesh, when you come in, speak slowly and clearly, and loudly. But first, don't shout. Just be perfect. Meanwhile, do you do HMOs? Is a question I'm going to get.
Yes. So ultimately, in the case of managed, it's £30 per tenancy. So hopefully, I've said that and not per property throughout. So if you've got a property with 4-bedroom HMO, it'd be 120 a month, which we still believe would be substantially cheaper than your local agent. It will still charge you 10%, which is probably, let's say, roughly going to be about £300 a month. So we're still by a big factor cheaper. But ultimately, from our point of view, it's 4 sets of tenants agreements, it's 4 sets of people who could ring us, it's 4 sets of managing that individually and finding tenants and things like that. So that's the model.
Super. Yogesh.
Hi, great talk. I'm based in London,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming you're doing the whole of England, I presume,
Yeah.
or want to. So how will you do the photos, the floor plan, all of that initial stuff, and how do you find local contractors? I mean, if you're not in the area, just how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah. So we use a service. If you don't know about it, you might want to check it out. But it's a service called ViewBar. So ViewBar have contractors up and down the country. So wherever you are in the country, we on demand would say we would say to you as the landlord, wait, when are you available? You might say I'm available on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and we push that through the ViewBar network. So they'll come out there, take the pictures, feed them back into us, and we upload them. In terms of contractors, basically, as we get tenants in an area, we'll do an exercise where we source them, and we also have a 24/7 emergency partner who has a national database of contractors as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. And just on that point, when we talked about the lone wolves and the lions, the part of the it's not there yet, but the part of the future solution is we'll open up our contractor network if people are using that. So if you're subscribing, I think it's £5 a tenancy to for us to CRM, store your documents and check your contracts and all that kind of stuff. But we wouldn't be answering the tenant inquiries. As we grow our contractor pod, you'll be able to access them.
Excellent stuff. I think I've just had a good business idea. It's important to help people on their journey, and my suggestion is that as people sign up, which I'm sure they will, and hopefully hopefully on the back of this, in full disclosure, as is maybe obvious, I've not used the Moove service yet myself, but might do in the future. Certainly been impressed with Kev so far. So, but when people sign up, I think they should be allotted sort of without telling them. So when they go into the portal or anything, they get an avatar, either the sheep, the goat, the wolf or the lion, just based on guesswork, which you think based on their tone of voice or sketchy information that you pulled for so far, and then they're going to look in and go, "Why is there a picture of a sheep here?" What's this?
Yeah, I wish I'd never told you. It's interesting because one of the questions you get asked sometimes from marketeers is what's the difference between segmenting and targeting? And segmenting is how you cut the cake. So in our case, the sheep, the wolves, the lions, and targeting is how you then pick the cake up. So it is interesting that. And I think fundamentally, listen to customers, learn from customers. There might be a sixth animal, never mind a fifth, in the future.
Wise owl.
Yeah, wise owl. If you want to make a play on your own unique animal as well, but
Suggestions, please email suggestions to Kev. We'll
yeah,
come on to details in a minute. Maybe a bankrupt dragon, like pulling out his pockets. He's gone under.
yeah, yeah. I
Right
wouldn't
on.
want to put a hippo there. That would have massive negative connotations, wouldn't it?
All kinds of choices for Monday's meeting. Before we wrap up, we'll wrap up very soon. Commercial. Do you do anything with commercial stuff or not yet?
The short answer is we've not done anything yet. It would be great to speak to a landlord who would, because I guess a lot of fundamentals the same. I'm sure the contracts are more kind of onerous and professional, I guess is the right word, or commercial. But yeah, we're agnostic, so yes. So if anybody wants to have that conversation with us, it's almost like we'd love to learn. So we'd like to have a kind of understand that and quite honestly and frankly is have the see if we can. Because ultimately we've not done anything commercial yet. But that's not to say no.
Excellent stuff. Really appreciate coming on to speak to us and answering those questions. I thank a shout out to people who asked those questions. Normally I shout them out as they come in, and I sort of half forgot today. So thanks to the likes of Isu and Elaine, and obviously Yogesh for those questions. Um, uh, 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 Contact information. How can people get hold of, especially for those, because for people watching on YouTube, the website address is behind your head. But for those on the podcast, people are lazy. We'll put it with the show notes. But what's the best way to either get hold of you or get hold of Moove or a bit of both?
Yeah, so you can go to www.move with two O's .house. That's our domain. You can email us at hello@move.house. And ultimately I'll ring our contact center with the numbers on the site and we can have a conversation. So it'd be fantastic.
Are you still answering the phones? Have you got people for that now?
We've got people for that now. Yeah, that's
It's not. Hello, it's Kev. Yeah,
That's Kev again. You know, I do the on socials. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram. Just type in Moove and look for a guy in a blue t-shirt. That's me. And you know, it's pretty. There's not many people all in blue. So yeah, find us there, and yeah, please drop us a follow and reach out. And it's always good to have conversations.
Super. Yeah, really appreciate that. Kev does all his own stunts. Thank you everyone for attending, and those listening and watching after the fact. Special thanks, of course, as always, to our lovely speaker today, Mr. Kev Monk.